Hey everyone, RogueGold here. Welcome back to the Division 2. Today, I've got a deep dive for you on Phase 2 of the ongoing public test server for next season, Into the Dark. You may have seen my previous video saying that this PTS phase shadow dropped back on Wednesday. Obviously, that was a good number of days ago. This video and review is coming in a bit late, so my apologies. But I really just wanted to make sure that I had time to really sink my teeth into this, get a feel for the changes. And there is a good number of things that people are still debating over on this. We don't have long to go until next season launch. It is currently set for June 16th, according to the live game calendar. So at this point, I feel like being concise and informed with our feedback is key. In light of that, we're going to hone in on 4 main feedback points and sections from this PTS. As always, those things will be timestamped down below. And so, settle in. Here comes some fresh hot opinions. Before we go any further, have to give a major shout out and thank you to all of our channel members. Thank you so much for continuing to show up each and every month and supporting my content in this journey. But without further ado, let's go. Alright, now the first one on my list here is actually not like a major topic or feedback point. I'm sorry, I just wanted to throw it in here for those of you who are not on PC or otherwise cannot play the PTS. In the patch notes that we got, it hinted that a new threat might be present in Retaliations, so I knew I had to check out what that may be. And if you go in there, what you'll find is that the current season's Black Tusk BTSU Team 9 kill squad has been replaced by the Knock Knock squad. And this is set to fit the season theme once again, as the hyenas are now our main threat this time around. So these guys have the same level of detail and intricacy as Team 9 did, right? There's unique names, unique character models. So nothing huge here, but I do think it's a nice detail to include this in Retaliations, given it is not going to be a focus this season like it was last time. And it wouldn't shock me if we saw some of the uniforms here repurposed for player cosmetics as we saw them do with Team 9. So stay tuned. Alright, but now let's move on to the big stuff, starting with the PVE DZ. I got to spend a good amount of time in here, and that led me to finding a number of additions and improvements and small other tweaks that were made from Phase 1. For one, the toxicity mechanic that is present here feels much more fleshed out. It has better UI, better sound effects to indicate when you progress to the next tier. Other rough edges last time, like different rogue prompts still existing, the fact that the extraction chopper arrived in like 5 seconds, all of that stuff has been smoothened out. My only real remaining concern here is with the stabilization agent, and that is a new mechanic that has been added here with Phase 2. No longer can you now freely call extractions when you have contaminated items in your bag. You now must also be carrying a stabilization agent. And this is a resource or equipment piece that is only acquirable via DZ chests at a 33% drop rate. Now, in theory, that shouldn't be a major deal, right? There's lots of chests across the DZ, and these DZs are small enough that as soon as you see someone call an extraction, a lot of the time you should be able to run from wherever you are, make it, hook your bag on. By the way, there is no bag limit on the rope. Up to 12 people in there can hook on one extraction, which is great. However, there are some cases where I think this will prove to be cumbersome or otherwise become a tool for trolling. And I say that because DZ chests have a 30-minute cooldown time. So in theory, if someone ran and opened all of them and no one else has a stabilization agent in the lobby, you're kind of SOL. There's not many other options. This also kind of rubs up against my pre-existing issues with PVE Dark Zone chests and exotic components. I don't think that they should share the same drop rate as the PvP Dark Zone ones do, and so that may also lead to a worse experience with the stabilization agent in play, given the chests are valuable to open and you want to beat people to them. So my personal proposal, and again the main thing I think they should improve before launch, is take another swing at DZ chests here. In the PvE Dark Zone, reduce their cooldown to like 10 minutes. I would buff the drop rate of the stabilization agent to maybe 50 or 75%, but then also make it so that no exotic components can drop from these crates. And I know on that last point some may think that I'm being elitist or whatever, but keep in mind another change they made here is that participating in the defeat of any extraction hunter within the PvE DZ awards you not only a guaranteed exotic component, but it also has a 2% chance to drop the Eagle Bear or the Ravenous. And that is a change that I'm very torn on. I'm not stoked when you compare it to the PvP Dark Zone rewards, given that that DZ has no outlet to compete with that, right? We don't have hunters at our extractions. But on the other hand, it is an objectively good change for the PvE Dark Zone in isolation. I think it caps off a nice gameplay loop. So I feel as though it would be a fair trade-off to remove exotic components from the chests, given that hunters will be essentially raining them. But again, the primary drive behind doing any of this is to lessen the friction with the stabilization agent. The other big conversation when it comes to the PVE Dark Zone has been the matter of PvP balancing within this zone. If you saw my Phase 1 video, we discovered that PvP normalization was enabled within the PvP Dark Zone, and that in turn changes a lot of builds and stats. At the time, I said that if this is intended, it should probably be removed and PvE players would enjoy that more. Since then, the PTS Phase 2 patch notes have clarified that this is intended and they meant it as an onboarding ramp of sorts to the PvP Dark Zones, so that if somebody is going to play in the PvE DZ, decide they want to dip their toe in the other ones, you don't have to rethink your entire build to head in there. That is something I had not considered, and so with that context, I've gained greater appreciation for the way that it is set up. And keep in mind, this is coming from the perspective of a PvP player. PvP onboarding and approachability has been pretty terrible all of Division 2's life, and so this is a solid baby step in that direction. That said, I've seen the discourse online. Many people do not like this whatsoever, and that is something that I do completely understand. I also don't think their philosophy here is 100% perfect, given that shade levels and expertise are still enabled within the PvE DZ. Those, however, get disabled if you go into the balanced Dark Zone, which is definitely the one that the most amount of new players would end up at if they want to try their hand at PvP. And so the loss of those, especially the Shade Watch, will still cause big build shifts when you lose out on crit stats and all of that. So it kind of feels like they currently have one foot in each door. They're trying to hold that middle ground. I'm fine if they keep it so as to better integrate with the other Dark Zones, but I won't be losing any sleep if they change it either. Let me know your thoughts on the matter. Alright, next let's talk PvP balancing. Fortunately, I had far more time and opportunities to dive into PvP during this test across both the DZ and Conflict. I tried various loadouts out myself. I fought several more to get as great a variety as I could, and overall, I'd say this felt really good. Now, I know there's some of you out there who love expertise being enabled within PvP. If so, the classic Dark Zone still supports that under this new rotation system, but just feeling the deflation of stats via expertise's removal and all the build tuning that has been done just feels so much better, in my opinion. Smoother time to kill, more room for outplaying, just better vibes overall. Now, I don't think everything here is completely perfect. A couple of outliers I picked up on. One of those is that the Bighorn and a couple of armor regen pieces got buffed this phase after initial nerfs in Phase 1, and in some areas there, I feel like they went too far, and it brings them too close back to the dominancy that they have on the live game. For example, the Bighorn got brought down to 20% headshot damage at max stacks in Phase 1. That's down from 150% in the live game, and so that did feel like a drastic reduction, right? In Phase 2 now it is 60%. I feel as though 40 would be an ideal middle ground given how easily you can still run up in someone's face and shoot this gun. Another example is the efficient chest piece talent. I feel as though Phase 1 had it landed in a really great spot. You got a 25% kit return chance and a 40% spec enhancement with the normal version of the talent. Now that is up to 35 and 50, with the perfect version giving you 55% kit return chance and a 60% spec kit enhancement. I personally think this should go back to exactly how it was in Phase 1, with the perfect version hitting a 50-50 split. The tough part with balancing this is that it is an example where the perfect talent comes on pretty much the best in slot piece that you would want for an armor regen build, that being Bellstone, and so I just think that makes it so that even having it be a little too good goes much further than it would with other items. So especially in light of that, I feel as though some small retuning would be good. A few other minor things that I picked up on, including the fact that the quick step is still giving its 20% movement speed bonus instead of the advertised 6. I plan on breaking down a few more changes in my full feedback write-up that I always do, but overall, I am very pleased with how this first revamp phase is turning out, and I truly cannot wait to dive back into the DZ on launch day. Alright, finally, let's then talk about Escalation. From what I've seen so far, this has drummed up the most amount of controversy. On the one hand, the devs did many of the things that they claimed they would, such as a rebalance of the token economy, but that has brought with it other certain drawbacks. So let's take a look at tokens first. This is the new chart as of Year 8 Season 2. 3 notable things have happened here. For one, entry costs have been reduced per escalation tier. Not by a ton, but you will see that this is lower than it is in the live game. They've then gone in and flipped payout benefit. You'll see that the leader now gets far more than the group does, but then those individual payout thresholds have also been altered. So for example, the leader is going to earn a little bit less than group members do in the live game, whereas group members are going to earn a little bit more more than the leader does in the live game, if that makes sense. This all, as I said, has drawn a good amount of backlash, in part due to changes also made in conjunction to this. Caches from the prototype vendor have been doubled in cost. It's now 10 for a random piece and 20 for a specific one. So, while it is important to give feedback on what you think is bad here, I also think taking the context into mind of the buffs that have been made is also important, which I've seen a lot less people talking about. One of those is that they've increased the exotic component rewards you get on escalation mission completion, though not by a ton. But more importantly, they made the change so that prototype drops are back from escalation mission crates. And so in theory, that is all connected to vendor costs, token payouts, etc., as it increases the total number of prototype drops that you were expected to get on an average day or run. This was the change that I wanted to test the most thoroughly, just to get a sense for how common drops were from this. So we ran to tier 5, right middle of the road in terms of risk and reward on the escalation scale, and I think the average drop for the group was 2 additional prototype items from opening up every crate in the run. So all in all, with this change, I expect that you will need to do maybe 1 extra tier 3 or 4 run to buy a crate, but in the meantime, you will be getting extra drops as you run all the missions. I still think the biggest point of contention here is that we've now seen the leader and group payout disparity for escalation pretty much flip completely. I think many people just wish we had a system so that everybody contributed tokens equally when you're setting up a run. That way the payout is the same across the board. Unfortunately, the game director did comment that while this was their original goal, it ended up having several issues in testing, so they ultimately pulled back from that idea. I'll be honest with you all, I feel a little bit detached from the escalation conversation at this point, given that I think the shark was already jumped quite a while ago from what I thought prototype gear should be, which is a truly rare and exciting drop. With that in mind, these changes seem pretty minor on my radar, but I know many of you are saying quite the opposite and that this will impact your experience greatly. So I wanted to present you all with all of the changes and information here, and I will be eager to hear your thoughts. Well, everybody, that is just about everything that I wanted to go over today in relation to Year 8, Season 2, PTS Phase 2. Once again, I apologize for the delay on this video and review. It took me a bit longer than I anticipated to really test everything out and get this together, but you've now heard all of my findings and reports. I would love to hear now your thoughts on everything that we went over. How are you feeling about the PVE Dark Zone and some of the changes made there? What do you think about the escalation conversation? If you were into PvP, what do you think about those balancing changes? Let me know. There's a lot to talk about. Next season is coming up quite soon, so I am interested to see what they were able to change and alter by then, but we will find out pretty soon, won't we? That's all I've got for today, my friends. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will catch you back very soon, but until then, RogueGold. Ow. Oh! We just got a Ravenous! Haha! I might not be friendly. Let's go.
Coming to the Division 2.
Let's go!
And